Don't look there. The rancher stared and froze in shock. The morning started quietly on Daniel Hayes's ranch, just like most mornings did. The sky was still pale, with soft sunlight slowly spreading across the fields. A cool breeze moved gently through the grass, carrying the fresh smell of earth and hay. Daniel liked this time of day the most. It gave him peace before the hard work began. He had lived on this ranch for more than 20 years. Every fence post, every path, every tree felt familiar to him. This land wasn't just property. It was his home, his history, and in many ways, his comfort. Ranch life was not always easy, but Daniel never complained. He believed steady effort and patience could solve almost anything. That day, his main task was fixing a fence near the far pasture. Some cattle had leaned against it the previous evening, loosening the wire. If he didn't repair it soon, they might wander too far. Daniel grabbed his tools, whistled softly for his dog Rusty, and headed out. Rusty trotted beside him happily. The brown dog had been Daniel's companion for years. Loyal, calm, and alert. Rusty understood ranch life almost as well as Daniel did. Usually the dog walked confidently, sniffing the ground or watching birds fly overhead. But today was slightly different. As they reached the pasture, Rusty slowed down. His ears lifted sharply, and he kept looking toward the distant tree line at the edge of the ranch. Daniel noticed, but didn't think much of it at first. Dogs often sensed animals or sounds humans missed. Still, Rusty's behavior continued. He didn't bark or growl, just watched quietly, almost cautiously. That small change planted a tiny seed of unease in Daniel's mind, though he quickly brushed it away. There was work to do. Daniel started repairing the fence. He tightened wire, checked posts, and replaced one damaged section. His movements were calm and practiced. Years of experience showed in how easily he worked. The quiet around him felt deeper than usual. No strong wind, no distant vehicle sounds, not even many birds. Only the soft rustle of grass and the occasional sound of cattle grazing nearby. After nearly an hour, Daniel straightened his back and stretched. That was when he noticed dust rising on the road leading to his ranch. A truck was approaching. He shaded his eyes and recognized the vehicle quickly. It was Carl Benton, his neighbor from the next ranch. Carl visited often, sometimes to borrow tools, sometimes just for conversation.
Their friendship had grown naturally over the years, but something about Carl's approach seemed unusual.
The truck slowed earlier than normal, and instead of his usual relaxed posture, Carl looked tense even from a distance. When the truck finally stopped, Carl didn't immediately step out. The engine stayed running for a few seconds. Daniel walked closer, curiosity growing. "Boarding!" Daniel called out casually. Carl opened the door slowly. His expression wasn't his usual friendly one. There was hesitation in his eyes, and his shoulders looked tight. Before Daniel could ask anything else, Carl spoke in a low voice. "Don't! Look there." Daniel blinked, confused. That was not how Carl normally spoke. The words carried a strange seriousness. "Look where?" Daniel asked. Carl didn't answer directly. He just tilted his head slightly toward the far tree line, the same direction Rusty had been watching all morning. Bad. Daniel felt a small chill, though the air wasn't cold. Human curiosity is strong, especially when someone says not to look. For a moment, he respected Carl's warning and kept his gaze forward. "What did you see?" Daniel asked again, bass. Carl took a slow breath. Not sure exactly. Drove past earlier. Saw something near your south fence. From far away, it didn't look normal.
That explanation didn't calm Daniel. It made him more curious. He trusted Carl.
The man wasn't the type to exaggerate or panic easily. Rusty gave a soft whine at Daniel's side.
That caught Daniel's full attention. Rusty almost never showed nervous behavior without reason.
Daniel slowly turned his head. At first, he couldn't clearly see anything.
Just trees, grass, and shadow. But then, near the fence line, he noticed a shape. It wasn't moving much. From that distance, it looked unclear, not something he could immediately identify. He narrowed his eyes, focusing. And then he froze. His body became still. His hands stopped moving. Even his breathing seemed to pause for a second. It wasn't fear exactly, more like sudden shock mixed with uncertainty. Carl watched Daniel carefully. Seeing Daniel freeze confirmed his own uneasy feeling from earlier. Neither man spoke. The ranch, which normally felt peaceful, suddenly seemed unfamiliar. Even the soft wind felt heavier. Daniel tried to make sense of what he was seeing, but distance and shadow made it difficult. His mind ran through possibilities quickly. An animal? Something caught in the fence? Something left behind by travelers? None of the answers felt clear. Rusty stayed close, unusually quiet now. Daniel realized something important in that moment. Sometimes it isn't danger itself that unsettles people. It's not knowing what they are looking at. Finally, Daniel spoke quietly.
Let's go closer. Carl nodded slowly. Neither rushed.
Careful steps felt wiser than quick ones. As they started walking, Daniel noticed how alert his senses had become. He heard every footstep in the grass, every faint sound in the air. Even his own heartbeat seemed louder than usual. The shape near the trees remained still. That stillness made it harder to understand. Daniel had faced storms, equipment failures, lost cattle, and tough seasons before. Those challenges were clear and practical, but this situation felt different because it was uncertain. Uncertainty, he realized, can create its own kind of tension. Step by step, they moved forward. And with each step, Daniel felt both curiosity and caution growing together, unsure of what they would find, but knowing they needed to see it clearly. That quiet walk toward the unknown became a moment Daniel would remember for a long time, because it reminded him how quickly an ordinary day can shift into something unexpected. Daniel and Carl moved slowly toward the tree line. Every step felt heavier than the last, because the uncertainty of what they were about to see pressed on their minds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the wind seemed to whisper quietly through the branches. Rusty, Daniel's dog, stayed close, occasionally stopping to sniff the ground, sensing the tension in the air. From a distance, the shape near the fence had looked strange and unclear, but now, as they approached, more details started to appear. It wasn't aggressive or moving in a threatening way, yet it was enough to make both men uneasy. Their eyes squinted to focus, trying to make sense of the shadowy figure partially hidden by tall grass and fence posts. Finally, they realized what it was: a young calf. It was tangled in loose wire that had probably come from a broken fence section or fallen from another property. The calf looked exhausted, with its legs trembling slightly, and it was too scared to move. Its soft brown eyes followed Daniel and Carl with a mixture of fear and confusion. Daniel's chest loosened a little. Relief mixed with concern as he realized there was no real danger, but the scene still tugged at him. He knew that the calf could injure itself if it continued struggling. The tangled wire made movement difficult, and any sudden pull might tighten it further. "Easy now," Daniel whispered softly, keeping his voice calm. He didn't want to frighten the calf more than it already was. Carl moved slowly, helping Daniel guide the animal toward safety. Together, they carefully untangled the wire. Psst. Rusty stood quietly to the side, occasionally nudging the calf gently, as if encouraging it to stay calm.
It took several minutes of patient work.
The calf had almost given up, trembling and breathing fast. But finally, Daniel managed to loosen the wire. The young animal stepped forward shakily, testing its legs. It was weak, tired but free at last. "Thank goodness," Carl said quietly, relief evident in his voice. "I thought it might be something serious when I first saw it," Daniel nodded, brushing dirt from his hands. "Distance and shadows can make anything look worse than it is." From far away, I would have been shocked too. They stayed with the calf for a while, making sure it wasn't injured. Minor scrapes covered its legs, but nothing serious. Its breathing gradually returned to normal, and it began to look more alert. Daniel knew the animal needed water and rest before it could be moved safely back to its home. He called out to Rusty, who immediately trotted over and sniffed the calf. The dog's presence seemed to comfort the animal further. Daniel couldn't help but smile at the simple scene. Man, dog, and calf all working together to correct a small but serious problem. "Looks like it wandered here from another ranch," Daniel said. "We'll need to contact someone to make sure it gets back safely." Carl nodded. "I'll help. Maybe one of the neighboring ranchers is missing a calf." As they waited, Daniel reflected on how quickly humans can imagine danger where there is none. Carl had seen the calf from far away and misinterpreted it as something threatening. Rusty had sensed tension in the air and stayed alert, signaling that something was different. But he didn't panic either. Daniel realized that fear often comes not from real danger, but from the unknown. Minutes passed. The calf, now calmer, started to graze lightly on the grass near the fence. Pain. Daniel and Carl exchanged quiet words about what might have caused the calf to end up there. Perhaps it had wandered through a weak section of another rancher's fence, or maybe it had been curious and strayed too far from its herd. Either way, it was fortunate that Daniel and Carl had been nearby. After a while, Daniel used his phone to contact local ranchers. He explained the situation, describing the young calf and where it was found. One rancher recognized the description immediately. "That's ours," he said. "We've been looking for that calf since last night." "Thank you for taking care of it." Relief washed over Daniel. He had spent the morning worrying about the unknown, but now, with clarity, he felt the satisfaction that comes from helping others. Small actions can make a big difference, he realized. The calf's safe return would not only restore the animal to its home, but also reassure its owners. Daniel and Carl stayed with the calf a little longer, letting it drink some water from a small trough Daniel had set up. Rusty remained at Daniel's side, watching over the calf like a silent guardian. The calm presence of the dog seemed to help both men relax. Daniel noticed something else, the quiet strength it takes to stay calm in uncertain situations. It was easy to panic when something looked strange or frightening from a distance. But careful observation, patience, and calm action turned fear into a manageable problem. Finally, the rancher arrived to pick up the calf. He thanked Daniel and Carl repeatedly, grateful for their quick action. The young animal, now healthy and alert, walked steadily toward its owner, occasionally glancing back as if saying goodbye. Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had been frozen by uncertainty earlier, but now he understood something important. Fear is often about the unknown. Once you face it carefully with patience and thought, it usually becomes manageable. Carl clapped him on the back.
Good work today.
I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here. Daniel smiled. Sometimes it's just about paying attention, Bray.
Little things can become big problems if ignored, but little actions can also fix them. As Carl left to return to his ranch, Daniel stayed a moment longer, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. The breeze was warmer now, and the air felt lighter.
Rusty wagged his tail, happy that the tension of the morning was gone. Daniel took a deep breath. The day had started like any other, quiet and calm, but had turned into a lesson in awareness, patience, and action. Life on the ranch was full of such small moments. Sometimes they were challenging. Sometimes they were simple. But each one offered a reminder that careful attention and steady action mattered more than fear. By mid-morning, Daniel returned to his usual chores.
He repaired the rest of the fence, checked on the cattle, and ensured that everything was in order. But the morning's event remained in his mind.
The memory of that unclear shape, the tension of uncertainty, and the relief of seeing it resolved stayed with him. It was a quiet story, yet it carried weight.
Rusty followed him closely, always alert but calm. Daniel patted his loyal companion.
Good boy, Rusty. You kept us aware and steady today. In that quiet moment, Daniel understood the rhythm of ranch life better than ever. Work, observation, care, all combined to create a life of responsibility and satisfaction. And even small events, like helping a lost calf, reminded him why he valued this life so deeply. As he looked toward the far pasture and the tree line, Daniel felt a sense of calm. There were always unexpected moments on the ranch, moments that tested patience and courage. But with careful thought and steady hands, most problems could be solved.
And for Daniel, that was enough. To face the day, to care for the animals, and to live with awareness of the world around him. Today, the morning's fear had turned into a quiet lesson, one he would remember for many years to come. After the young calf had been safely returned to its owners, the quiet of the ranch settled over Daniel Hayes' property once again. The wind moved gently through the grass, carrying the familiar scents of hay and earth. Daniel sat on the edge of his porch, letting the warmth of the morning sun soak into his shoulders. Rusty lay at his feet, still alert, occasionally glancing toward the distant tree line, but calm now. The tension of earlier hours had faded, replaced by a reflective quiet. Daniel thought about how quickly the morning had shifted. What had started as a normal day, routine chores, fence repairs, and cattle checks, had become a lesson in uncertainty. One small shape in the distance, one unclear movement near the fence, had sent him into a state of tension he rarely experienced. Even Carl, who usually appeared composed and unshakable, had seemed affected by the moment. He realized that fear often comes not from danger itself, but from not knowing what is there. Bias. The unknown can play tricks on the mind, making small problems feel like enormous ones. He had seen it on the ranch many times, a shadow that seemed to move, a sound in the distance, or a sudden disturbance in the wind could make the calmest person tense. Yet when he faced the situation directly, taking slow, deliberate steps, it often proved far less serious than imagined. Daniel looked down at Rusty. The dog had been a faithful companion through years of ranch work, witnessing storms, broken fences, and lost animals. Rusty had instinctively sensed the tension and stayed close, reminding Daniel that observation and calmness mattered more than panic. Pest. Animals, he thought, often understood the world more clearly than humans, simply because they responded to what they sensed rather than what they imagined. As he leaned back in his chair, Daniel replayed the events in his mind. Carl's warning had triggered his curiosity, of course, but also taught him patience. There was a delicate balance between caution and curiosity, he realized. Too much caution could lead to inaction, while too much curiosity could lead to mistakes. Today, they had found the right balance, careful observation followed by calm, decisive action. His thoughts drifted to the calf itself. It had been small, vulnerable, and confused, yet resilient. In many ways, Daniel saw a reflection of life in that small animal. The calf's fear had been real, but it had also been manageable. With guidance, patience, and care, it had regained its strength and found safety again. Daniel found a lesson in that. Challenges, no matter how overwhelming they seem from a distance, can often be resolved with steady, thoughtful action. Daniel's reflections shifted to the community around him. Living on a ranch meant being connected to neighbors, animals, and the land itself. Life was not solitary. It required cooperation and trust. Today, that connection had been evident. Carl had noticed something unusual and acted responsibly by warning Daniel. Together, they had addressed the situation calmly and effectively. Bang! Contacting the neighboring ranchers ensured the calf was returned to its rightful home. Each action had required awareness and consideration, qualities essential to life on the ranch. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel's thoughts turned to routine yet meaningful tasks. He checked the cattle once more, ensuring none had wandered and that fences remained secure. Rusty followed silently, as faithful and watchful as ever. The calm of the ranch was comforting, yet Daniel understood it was a calm built on vigilance. He knew that even ordinary days could suddenly shift, and that readiness was always necessary. Later, Daniel walked toward the barn, taking slow steps. Each movement reminded him of the morning's lesson. That clarity replaces fear when approached with calm attention. He paused near the water trough, watching a few calves drink and nuzzle each other. Life continued as it always did, simple and steady, yet full of small but meaningful moments. The contrast between fear and calm, between uncertainty and action, had become clear to him. Daniel's mind wandered to his own life beyond the ranch. The lesson of patience and observation was not limited to animals or fences. People often allowed fear to control their actions. Fear of the unknown, fear of mistakes, fear of challenges. But today he had seen how careful attention and decisive yet gentle action could transform fear into a solution. That thought brought him a quiet satisfaction, as if the morning had given him not only a resolved problem but also a reminder for all aspects of life. He thought of his family and friends, how easily misunderstandings could escalate when emotions ran high and clarity was absent. Today had been a demonstration of how collaboration and thoughtful action brought resolution. Fear had been replaced with calm understanding and confusion with clarity. The reflection comforted him. These lessons, though small, mattered deeply in a world full of uncertainties. But Daniel returned to the porch as the afternoon approached. Rusty stretched at his side, lazily wagging his tail. The soft sounds of the ranch, the distant mooing of cows, the rustling of grass in the breeze, the chirping of birds, created a rhythm that felt grounding. He realized that life's tension often arose from ignoring simple rhythms, from rushing through moments without paying attention. Today had been a reminder to slow down, observe, and act with awareness. As he watched the horizon, Daniel felt gratitude. Gratitude for the simple life he led, for the animals who depended on him, for neighbors who supported each other, and for moments that taught quiet but important lessons. The morning had begun with fear, but it had ended with understanding. A restored calf, and a stronger connection to his own instincts and the world around him.
He reflected further on Rusty's role.
The dog had been more than a companion. He had been a guide, alerting Daniel to something he might have overlooked.
Daniel understood that life, much like ranching, relied on companions, whether human or animal, to provide perspective, support, and vigilance. He patted Rusty's head, smiling. "You kept me grounded today, boy," he said softly.
Daniel also thought about Carl's involvement.
The neighbor had been cautious yet observant, demonstrating that wisdom often comes from shared responsibility and communication.
In moments of uncertainty, the support of another person could turn confusion into action.
That lesson stayed with Daniel as he looked toward the tree line again, now calm but mindful.
As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fields, Daniel felt a sense of peace. The events of the morning, though simple in nature, a lost calf, a few tense moments, had provided clarity about fear, patience, and action. He knew that life would always bring uncertainties, but he also knew that steady observation and careful action could transform these moments into lessons rather than crises. He walked slowly toward the barn one last time before evening chores. Rusty followed, alert but relaxed. Daniel checked each fence, ensuring cattle were safely contained and each animal had water. The day, once ordinary, had turned into a meaningful story of vigilance, patience, and care. Sitting back on the porch later, Daniel allowed himself a moment to simply watch the ranch breathe. Trees swayed gently in the wind, cows grazed calmly, and Rusty rested at his feet. Life moved slowly here, in a rhythm Daniel understood and appreciated. The earlier tension had faded, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that came from action, reflection, and understanding. He thought about the future, knowing that more moments like this would come, unexpected, confusing, perhaps even frightening at first glance. But Daniel felt ready. Today had reinforced that fear was often temporary, that clarity could be found through calm observation, and that small, thoughtful actions mattered more than panic. Even as the light faded, Daniel's mind remained alert. He watched for signs, listened to the sounds of the ranch, and appreciated the subtle lessons of daily life. The morning had started with tension and ended with clarity, but it had left behind a quiet understanding, one that would guide him in the days to come. As night fell, the ranch settled into its usual peaceful rhythm. Stars began to appear in the clear sky, shining over the fields Daniel had cared for his entire life. Rusty curled up at his side, tired but content. Daniel looked out over the land, knowing that challenges, though sometimes sudden and unexpected, could always be met with patience, awareness, and calm action. But he leaned back, letting the soft night air wash over him, and allowed himself a quiet smile. The day had been a reminder of simple truths, that fear is often temporary, that observation is essential, and that thoughtful action can resolve even the most puzzling situations. For Daniel Hayes, life on the ranch was not just about work. It was about learning, understanding, and embracing every moment with clarity and calmness. The events of the morning and afternoon would stay in his memory, a quiet story of patience, care, and the unexpected lessons the land could teach him.
The next morning, the ranch woke up slowly.
The sun peeked over the hills, casting a soft golden light across Daniel Hayes's property. The air was crisp and filled with the earthy smell of grass and soil. Daniel rose early, as he always did, his mind already moving through the day's tasks.
But today felt different.
The events of the past 2 days, the mysterious shape, the frozen moment, the tangled calf, still lingered in his thoughts. They had left a mark, not of fear, but of awareness. Rusty was already up, pacing near the porch, his tail wagging softly. The dog seemed to sense that today was important. Let's see how things go today. As Daniel walked toward the far pasture, he noticed the calm that had returned after yesterday's uncertainty. The fences were intact, the cattle were grazing quietly, and the soft hum of the wind moved through the trees. Yet he couldn't help thinking about how quickly life could shift from peaceful to tense in just moments. The lessons of the past morning were still fresh. He had learned to respect the unknown, to observe carefully, and to act with patience rather than panic. Beck. Soon a vehicle approached from the main road. Daniel recognized the sound immediately. The calf's owners had arrived to bring their young animal home. Daniel felt a small wave of satisfaction. The calf had been safe, cared for, and now it would return to the family that loved it. The sense of duty fulfilled gave him a quiet pride. The rancher stepped out of his truck carrying a soft, grateful smile. "Daniel, Carl, thank you so much," he said, his voice warm. "We've been worried sick about this little one. Base. Seeing it safe and healthy, I can't thank you enough." Daniel nodded, brushing off the compliment. "Bah."
It's all part of living on a ranch. Animals wander. Accidents happen.
We just help when we can. The calf, now looking stronger and more confident, walked steadily toward its owner. It glanced back at Daniel and Rusty, as if acknowledging their help. Daniel felt a tug in his heart. Even small actions, he realized, could leave an impression that lasted far beyond the moment. Carl was there too, smiling more comfortably now. The tension that had marked their first encounter with the unknown was gone.
"You know," Carl said lightly, "I never thought I'd be so worried over a calf."
From a distance it looked, I don't know, strange. But up close, it was just a young animal in need of help. But distance changes everything. Shadows, shapes, even sounds can fool the mind. Bay.
That's why patience and calm observation matter. The calf's owners loaded it carefully into the truck.
Daniel watched, feeling a sense of closure. The problem had been resolved peacefully, calmly, and with care. Oh, one had been hurt, and the calf would return home safely. This was the kind of outcome Daniel valued more than anything. Resolution through thoughtful action. Bay. Once the owners drove away, the ranch returned to its quiet rhythm. Daniel and Rusty walked slowly back toward the barn, their steps measured and calm. The morning felt peaceful, but Daniel's mind lingered on the lessons of the past hours. Life on the ranch was rarely just work. It was full of small challenges, unexpected events, and moments that required attention, patience, and care. Each incident offered insight, a chance to grow, and a reminder of the balance between calm observation and decisive action. Daniel thought about Carl and the role he had played. The neighbor had warned him, showing awareness and responsibility. Without that, Daniel might have been caught off guard. He realized that relationships, trust, and communication were as important on a ranch as the fences and animals themselves. Life, he understood, was woven together with connections. To land, to animals, and to people. As the sun rose higher, Daniel moved on to routine tasks. He checked the remaining fences, made sure water troughs were full, and observed the cattle grazing calmly. Rusty followed, always alert, occasionally sniffing the air and grass. Even the dogs seemed to understand the subtle rhythm of ranch life. That vigilance did not always mean alarm, and calm did not always mean ignorance. Daniel paused at the far corner of the pasture, looking out toward the tree line where the calf had been found. The morning's events had left a quiet impression on him. That small, tangled animal had been more than just a calf. It had been a reminder. A reminder of how easily fear could take hold, how quickly the mind could assume danger, and how important it was to approach life's uncertainties with calm, thoughtful action.
He thought further about his own experiences beyond the ranch.
The lesson applied to more than just fences and cattle. Life's challenges often seemed overwhelming until faced directly. Problems that appeared frightening from a distance. A difficult conversation, an unexpected change, or a troubling event often proved manageable when approached patiently and deliberately. The morning with the calf had illustrated this clearly. Band. Later, Daniel took a moment to sit on the porch once more. Rusty rested at his feet, content and loyal. The wind moved gently through the grass, carrying soft sounds of the ranch, the low murmur of cattle, the rustle of leaves, the distant chirping of birds. Daniel breathed deeply, letting the calm wash over him. Life was still full of work, but also full of lessons that mattered. He reflected on how moments of uncertainty could be both unsettling and instructive. The unknown had a way of testing patience, observation, and courage, but yet, when met with calm awareness, it often revealed itself to be less frightening than imagined. The morning had shown him that small, thoughtful actions could transform fear into understanding. Daniel's thoughts turned to gratitude for the land, for the animals, for Rusty, and for neighbors like Carl, who shared responsibility and vigilance. He understood that life was not meant to be faced alone. Perhaps community, care, and companionship were as vital as skill and experience. As the afternoon approached, Daniel continued his work. He repaired another section of the fence, moved feed to the cattle, and checked the barns. Each task, though ordinary, carried a sense of purpose. Every small action was a contribution to the balance and safety of the ranch. And in each task, Daniel carried the quiet awareness of the morning's lesson. Observe carefully, act patiently, and approach the unknown with clarity rather than fear. Even as the day progressed, Daniel remained alert. He watched the fields, listened to the soft sounds of animals and wind, and maintained a steady rhythm in his work. Rusty, ever watchful, mirrored his calmness, reinforcing the subtle lessons of attention and presence. Together they moved through the ranch as a team, responding to each situation with quiet assurance. As evening drew near, the light softened, casting a golden hue over the pastures. Daniel paused, looking out over the land he had cared for all his life. The sun dipped behind the hills, the sky painted in warm shades of orange and pink. The calm of the ranch was comforting, yet Daniel felt more aware now than ever. He understood that life, much like ranching, would always bring uncertainty. Yet uncertainty was not something to fear. It was something to meet with patience, awareness, and thoughtful action. Rusty lay at his side, tail occasionally flicking, ears alert to distant sounds. Daniel patted him gently.
Good boy, Rusty. Today was a reminder for both of us. The stars began to appear in the clear night sky, shining over the fields.
The calm rhythm of ranch life continued, steady and reassuring. Daniel felt a sense of completion. The calf had returned safely, the fences were secure, and the lessons of patience and observation were fully realized. Bass. He reflected once more on the earlier tension, the fear sparked by the unknown, and the relief that came with clarity. It had been a quiet but powerful reminder of life's nature. That fear often comes from uncertainty, that calm observation reveals the truth, and that careful action can resolve even the most confusing situations. Sitting back on the porch, Daniel looked over his land with quiet satisfaction. Life on the ranch continued, full of work, challenges, and moments of reflection. The events of the past days had left a mark, not of fear, but of understanding. He knew that similar moments would come in the future, moments where patience, observation, and calm action would be required. And he felt ready. For Daniel Hayes, life on the ranch was more than chores or cattle. It was a lesson in awareness, care, and responsibility. It was about understanding that the unknown need not cause panic, that steady action could resolve confusion, and that even small, thoughtful deeds could leave lasting impact.
The ranch settled into the night, quiet and calm. Daniel felt a deep contentment, knowing that the morning's events had strengthened his understanding of life, vigilance, and responsibility. Rusty rested at his feet, loyal and faithful, a reminder of the partnership that had helped turn uncertainty into clarity. As Daniel finally rose to head inside, he took one last look at the fields, the fences, and the distant tree line. The events of the past days, the unknown shape, the frozen moment, the tangled calf, and the safe resolution had become part of the story of his life. And it was a story that reminded him of what truly mattered: observation, patience, care, and the courage to face the unknown, calmly and wisely.
He closed the barn door gently, knowing the ranch, the animals, and the lessons of life were all in balance once more.
And in that quiet moment, Daniel felt a deep, lasting peace, the sense that he had met the unknown with patience, learned from it, and come out stronger on the other side.